And we're off and running on the Krueger Show, Friday, 10:54, kind of like 10:45. Similar numbers. We're just moving it around. A couple minutes behind. It's always my fault. Welcome to the Krueger Show, where I'm always late. But you know what? We deliver great content. At least
we have breaking news, Larry.
And we have breaking news. And, of course, we're brought to you. That breaking news is that we're brought to you by Pig in a Pickle. Well, actually, that's not breaking news. But breaking news, we are brought to you by Pig in a Pickle. We are brought to you by two locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. Check them out. Get some brisket chili. We're brought to you by Marin Autoglass, Underdog Fantasy as well. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug. And we are brought to you by Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles in Monterey, Pacific Grove to be exact. Give Anthony Catania a call, 831-521-5264. Thanks to all of them for being proud sponsors of the Krueger Show. Chase Sr. in the house. It's Friday. There is breaking news. Colton McKivitz, within the last hour, has become significantly richer. The Niners signed him. Is it a one-year deal for $7 million? Is it a 2-year deal? I'm seeing it kind of reported in different spots at different amounts. What's your assessment of the deal today? Is it a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal?
So it's a 1-year contract extension worth $7 million. So now he's under contract through 2025, and 65% of that $7 million is guaranteed money.
Okay. So he's on the books this year for $3.6 million. And I know there's a lot of people that are just immediately in their feelings about this. I love this move. One, you need continuity on your offensive line. The Niners have 6 defensive line free agents. They could let all 6 go, replace them with 6 better players, and they'll be fine. But with offensive line, you got to have some continuity. This guy's smart. He's tough. He can play all 5 spots. I personally think his best spot is center, and we can get into that in a second. This year, he ranked 47th out of 81 offensive tackles, 8 spots lower than Mike McGlinchey, but for a fraction of the price. And in 2023, he played over 1,000 snaps. McKivitz did. He allowed 47 pressures, 9 sacks, 4 hits, 34 hurries. Just from listening to your video, we probably don't agree on this one. You don't seem to like McKivitz back with the Niners. Give me your man. Am I reading into that?
Well, you're correct. And I have an issue with this signing if this is the Niners' plan at right tackle. The last 2 years in the playoffs, I think San Francisco has been exposed along the offensive line. Against Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game and in Super Bowl 58 against Kansas City, when the Chiefs were able to generate 11 pressures on Brock Purdy, 9 of them were unblocked, and Colton McKivitz has been a part of that problem, not last year, but this past year, on an offensive line that I simply did not think was good enough against elite teams and elite edge rushers. And the numbers really don't check out. His Pro Football Focus numbers aren't good. In 2023, more than 1,000 snaps, 9 sacks allowed, 47 total pressures, 4 hits. It's not always on Colton McKivitz. And let's get this out of the way, too. Chris Jones going unblocked in the Super Bowl was not on Colton McKivitz. Spencer Burford even admitted that was his mistake. In the playoffs, McKivitz also was not good against upper echelon competition. 12 total pressures and 2 hits. I think offensive line in 2021, 2022, and in 2023 has been the biggest thing that's held this team back. And the Niners continue to be somewhat cheap in investing along the offensive line. And for me, you look at this roster with Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Charvarius Ward, with head coach Kyle Shanahan. To me, when you go cheap along the offensive line, when it continues to be an issue, it's like having a Rolls Royce with hubcaps on it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, if they still address offensive line at right guard and right tackle, and they're bringing back McKivitz as maybe a 6th offensive lineman who can play right tackle, who can play guard, because to your point, he does offer you versatility, and he's more of a backup, then I can see why the Niners made this move, because you're right. They need some offensive line continuity. But if their plan is to have Colton McKivitz as the right tackle for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, I don't think that Colton McKivitz is a starting right tackle for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And I think that's become clear over time. Now, the positive spin lowers his cap hit for 2024 and 2025. That frees up some dollars to address other areas of need. Did they see Kevin Dotson get $16 million per from the Los Angeles Rams and say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money for a guy who the numbers check out for him to be somewhat of an average player? Maybe. I just hope this isn't what their plan is at right tackle. I hope it doesn't take them away from drafting a right guard or a right tackle in the NFL draft in a class that is loaded with a bunch of offensive linemen who I saw last week and talked to them are really good players, built-in labs, and can be significant contributors on the offensive line for the next 5 to 10 years.
All fair. All fair. My whole read on it is that they're probably going to get rid of Brendel. So, Brendel signed a 4-year deal for $16.4 million. He ranked like 16th out of 36 centers. He played 1,024 snaps, 29 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 hits, 24 hurries, only 1 penalty. But to me, I think McKivitz's best spot is, a sixth O lineman, swing guy, or maybe starter at center. I like him more at center. But then I also like this signing for, I don't want to get to pick 28 in the draft in the first round, a couple picks in front of the 49ers, and have the 49ers going, oh my God, Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga, Latham, Mims, Morgan, Guyton, and Sumatea are all gone. So now we're just going to have to take Patrick Paul from the University of Houston. Or we're going to have to take Karan Amagaji, who's a tremendous athlete, but he's a raw prospect coming out of Yale. I kind of like, obviously it's a great tackle group, and all those guys that I named already are pretty damn good. I kind of like that next tier that has Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, that has Javon Foster from Missouri, that has Christian Jones from the University of Texas, that has Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. I really loved what I saw at a Gottlieb Ayadazi from Maryland at the Combine. One of my favorite offensive tackles in this entire draft is Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State. He's projected to be there in round 2 and round 3. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like there's a chance if you go for that second tier, if the Niners evaluation is the same as mine, that they really have other needs and they like Greenfield and Ayadezi and Henderson and maybe Roger Rosengarten or Christian Jones, Javon Foster. If they like that second group of tackles, well, they may go defensive line early. And to me, I'd rather see them do that. I think that's where the value plays at their spot in the draft. And if Colton McKivitz gives you a little bit of latitude to go D-line or different position up front, corner, and try to hunt for value on offensive line with some guys who are a little bit more raw. They're not quite plug and play guys. I'm okay with that. I'd be fine if they drafted Garrett Greenfield and had McKivitz there to kind of, just in case Greenfield's not ready in the first month.
One thing this does do, it does give you flexibility for a couple of reasons. And again, if McKivitz is coming back as your swing tackle, a guy who can play guard, can play center, I like that, because on a 53-man roster, you're always going to have 7, 8 offensive linemen, and 6 or 7 of them, maybe 8 of them, are going to be active on game day. So it gives you flexibility there, and having a guy who can fill in at all those spots, who played a lot last year, and you went to the Super Bowl with McKivitz playing at right tackle, I think is valuable. And then another reason why it gives you some flexibility, you now can probably more so go best player available at number 31 as compared to reaching and drafting at a position of just need and not getting the best player. And I'm always kind of a BPA, best player available type of guy. And look, $16 million per year for a guard, that's a little bit too expensive for my liking. And that might take San Francisco away from a Robert Hunt or a Mike Owenu, two free agent targets who I really like, because they're better than Kevin Dotson. And now they're going to have markets where they go to the negotiating table and say, we're better than Kevin Dotson. We deserve a little bit more than that. So paying $16 million per for a guard or a right tackle for that matter is a lot of money, especially when you have other needs on this roster. And you're paying a lot of dollars to other players on your team because your roster is littered with premium players that the San Francisco 49ers have been able to draft and develop or sign in free agency. And cornerback, it's a good cornerback class, especially at number 31. They could go defensive line now at number 31 if they want. Shoot, they could go wide receiver. Xavier Worthy would not shock me at all. And that would be an interesting selection if you have Xavier Worthy, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel for 2024. And then next year, after you extend Ayuk, hopefully you have some flexibility if you want to move off of Deebo Samuel, because you don't think that you can pay two wide receivers $25 million each, totaling that to $50 million. Again, I just have an issue here if it's McKivitz as the starting right tackle, because I just thought he got pushed around, and I just don't think he's good enough to sustainably be a starting right tackle trying to protect Brock Purdy. You didn't run to the right side all that much because he wasn't that good against the run. If a player like Graham Barton out of Duke falls to number 31, that'd be best player available for me because I think he's worthy of drafting in the teens.
Well, it's interesting because they're outside of Trent Brown, who's got weight problems and has floated around. I don't see that tackle in free agency. So I love the re-signing of McKivitz because at least now you're not all in at tackle at 31. I'm just looking at one mock draft, and who knows how the whole thing shakes out. But, I mean, they've got Troy Fatanu, who I really love, and I thought his workout in Indy was impressive, the Washington offensive lineman. Now, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? Some people think he's a guard. I like Graham Barton, too. Is he a guard or is he a tackle?
He played center, too, at Duke.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who is all over the map. To me, I just think when I'm looking at that pick at 31, based coming out of the combine, I would say I want to look hard at Xavier Legette right there. I want to look hard at Braden Fisk right there. I may want to look hard at Rook Aurora, I should say, at that spot. I know that's early for some people, but I think Aurora is really, really special. So those are three guys that I would like to look at over Kingsley Sumatea and whatever offensive lineman is left there. Edgerrin Cooper, I think, is a star linebacker for A&M. I mean, he's as safe as it comes. Cedric Gray could be an amazing linebacker for the 49ers as well. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of like
McKinstry, Nate Wiggins. Maybe they fall to 31. Those are really good corners.
TJ Tampa is super physical. I love everything that I've read and seen and watched about Zach Frazier from West Virginia, another kid from West Virginia who could be maybe the best center in the draft, in my opinion. I mean, I think he's really good. Cooper Beebe from K-State is a destroyer as a guard. He might be somebody I'd be interested in.
Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon's a stud too, the center.
Yeah, the center. So I think McKivitz is a smart signing here. Why? Because I think he's versatile. He can play all five spots. He's smart. He's tough. He could play right tackle in a pinch. But, if you don't have him and he goes somewhere else, now you have to go right tackle at 31. And I think their best spot going into the draft is to be able to go right tackle or offensive line at 31, but not be wed to it.
And it's nice, too, that they have 11 picks at their disposal, and they're obviously drafting for the first time in the first round since they drafted Trey Lance. And I kind of like the picks that they have lined up in the second round, the compensatory picks in the third. They have a bunch of picks in the fifth. And you can find really quality offensive linemen, again, in a really deep offensive line class. in some of those later rounds and go best player available here. Again, my issue is that $7 million, 65% of that is guaranteed. That's legitimate money. I saw somebody throw out there, this is a thank you to Colton McKivitz for holding it down at right tackle, but that's like solid offensive line money. And so my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, is this really the plan at right tackle after the last 3 years we've been talking about how offensive line has been an issue for this team?
Yeah, I think more than anything, you don't want to be naked at offensive tackle, but you need an offensive tackle. You need your future left tackle. You need your future right tackle. McKivitz is what he is, who is, he's a really smart, tough, assignment sound, sixth offensive lineman on a championship team, or maybe he's your starting center. But I don't think he's a starting right tackle on a championship team. I don't. But I do think it's smart to get this done because he's so versatile, and I think he can help you in a lot of spots, and he could lead to you deciding, what, if you can re-sign Feliciano, maybe Brendel could be excess. I do think they're still very much alive in the race to get an offensive tackle in the draft. I just don't think it's going to, the way I mocked it, and I've looked at it a bunch, I think if you're really going to kick butt on the draft and look for value, you got to find a couple of players before your offensive tackle. Get to that second tier. Like Javon Foster, the hand strength that he showed in the one-on-ones in Mobile was fantastic. And this guy, I think, is really athletic. I think he's got the frame to put on another 10 pounds. This guy could be the replacement for Trent Jones in 2 years and a starter at right tackle this year. So
yeah, I like Foster a lot. And I know you're in the locker room all the time, and I was around the team for the Super Bowl and stuff. I know you've interviewed McKivitz a lot. So you kind of get the sense like this guy's tough. He can fill in at all spots. And honestly, offensive lineman interviews are some of my favorites because they're the most cerebral. They're the most well-spoken. They see the game from a different perspective. I actually love speaking with offensive linemen because they're so enjoyable to talk to because they really allow you to see the game in a different way. And you learn a lot from offensive linemen too.
Well, two things about it. One, from being around Trent Williams, Trent, has sung the praises of McKivitz multiple times. And he basically just says, hey, look, this guy's not afraid. It doesn't matter if he's going up against Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. He's a tough, good old boy he's not afraid. So that's one. I think versatility is important. Then when you do go in the room, the one thing that you get a feeling for, and when you get a chance to talk to Forster as much as we do, you get a feeling for how they're kind of their internal pecking order. And even though McKivitz gets dragged by certain content creators and fans, in the room, he's very well respected. And to me, that tells me something about the guy. He's a very well-respected player in the room. He's, you walk up to his locker, he's almost always got the game plan on the tablet next to Charlie Warner, and they're sitting there going through play after play after play. So, they made him their gold helmet designation player in the draft year when he came out. And that's they don't have a lot of guys like that. They don't always work out. I mean, Trey Lance was one of those guys. I believe maybe Braden Willis might have been one of those guys. But basically, it's guys that they feel like not only are good players, but fit their culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I agree with you. If he is the sole answer at right tackle, and you're just going to put him out there like you did this year and just say, we're crossing our fingers that he's good enough at right tackle, bad move. But if he's there to give yourself a little bit more, so John Lynch can play the draft a little bit more straight for value, then I think that's a good thing because I don't want to see them reach for an offensive lineman at 31 just to say they drafted one, especially not if they're going to pass on, Ruka. I mean, that guy's 295 pounds and fast. Not if you're going to pass on, TJ Tampa, who's a awesome number one type corner who's physical and hits and sets the edge. And, to me, there's going to be some higher rated players than the 9th rated or 10th rated offensive tackle, which is what they're going to be staring at most likely at 31.
And I'm certainly willing to eat the crow if this move ends up working out, if McKivitz improves. And I'm all for cultural fit, scheme fit, having a guy like this who can be a critical member of filling in for everybody along that offensive line. All of that is great. My initial reaction was $7 million contract extension, 65% of that is guaranteed. That's legit money. If the Niners' plan is for him to be your right tackle, when you continue to kind of be cheap along the offensive line, you paid Trent Williams, that's great. You drafted Aaron Banks in the second round. It's worked out pretty well. I didn't love the move. Jake Brendel, $5 million per year at the center spot. I think you can find a better player than that. Maybe they address that this offseason. But if by the end of the offseason, Brendel's your center, they run it back with Burford once again, and then McKivitz at right tackle, or even John Feliciano at right guard, who's a little bit better than Burford, what are you expecting the end result to be? You're playing with fire at that point when we've seen this Niners offensive line get pushed around by some physical teams up front. It just can't be the solution when you see some of the other elite teams in the NFL investing heavily and having these dogs along the offensive line, like a Creed Humphrey at center for Kansas City, Elaine Johnson at right tackle for Philadelphia. When Philadelphia's paying big money to Elaine Johnson and Jordan Mailata, they can invest there. And in the draft, like Trent Williams is 35 years old. So at some point, you have to have a plan to draft an offensive tackle who might be able to start at right tackle and then move over to left tackle. And if a good player falls to 31, Kingsley Suamataia, any of these other tackles, and their best player available, I think you have to address that. And then if you pop McKivitz to right guard, I think that he could play better as a right guard, and that's pretty solid guard money.
I'd love to see the Niners go sign Nick Allegretti, who I'm a big fan of from Kansas City, and plug him in at right guard. If it was up to me, I'd have Trent Williams at left tackle, Banks at left guard, McKivitz at center, Allegretti at right guard, Feliciano as a backup, Burford as a backup, Zakel as a backup, and then I would draft an offensive tackle or two, and see if I could get one of them to start and one of them to back up. But that's how I would address the offensive line. Free agency gets rolling Monday, not officially, but the tampering, and we'll hear all kinds of deals coming down on Monday. Give me some names that you think the Niners are locked in on. I mean, do you think that they are going to do what they did the last 2 years, which is allow the rank and file, they got 21 free agents, allow 17 of them to walk, take those comp picks, and then do you think they'll go get that one premier guy? Last year it was Javon Hargrave. Whether it worked out or not, I don't think so, but I like the idea. The year before it was Mooney Ward. Are the Niners in the running, you think, for a top-tier free agent?
I think they are, and it's so funny because people have chirped at me saying, Chase, the Niners have no cap space. There's no way that they're going to sign any of these big-ticket free agents. But when you look at the history of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, literally since they took over in 2017 with their first year, they've made countless huge moves in free agency to address areas of weakness, to get a player who they think is really going to help them. And I just want to run through all of these moves really quickly to provide some context, and then we'll talk some free agent targets here. In 2017, first year of a rebuild, they signed Pierre Garçon, Kyle Juszczyk, Robbie Gould, and then traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. And then in 2018, they made Jimmy Garoppolo the NFL's highest paid quarterback, signed Richard Sherman to be their top flight corner, Jerick McKinnon and Weston Richburg. They signed those players in free agency. If it wasn't for the injury issues to Richburg, he still might be playing at this point at a really elite level. In 2019, they traded for Dee Ford, signed Quan Alexander to a move that was north of $50 million, as well as Tevin Coleman, who was a Kyle Shanahan favorite from Atlanta. 2020, traded DeForest Buckner, paid Jimmy Ward, Eric Armstead, and made George Kittle the highest paid tight end in the history of the NFL. In 2021, gave Trent Williams the largest contract ever for an offensive lineman, Juice was signed to the largest deal ever for a fullback. They signed Alex Mack. I wish he was still playing. Samson Ebukam, and made Fred Warner the highest paid off-ball linebacker in the history of football at the time. In 2022, they're not going to make any big moves coming off the NFC Championship game. Charvarius Ward, 3-year, $42 million contract, and extended Debo 3 years, 71.5. And then last year, once again, Niners, they don't have any cap space. They don't have any money. They don't have a lot of needs. They're not going to sign anybody. Javon Hargrave came out of nowhere. 4 years, $84 million. And then they made Nick Bosa the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of football. So every year that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been running this team, running this front office, they made the trade for Christian McCaffrey, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Willis. Those are other moves that they've made. They've been really active. They've been aggressive. They've invested in this football team, and they've taken risks. So for anybody saying out there that they're just going to sit idly and not make any moves, I disagree. They have needs at defensive tackle. They need another edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa. They could use another linebacker. They could use another corner. They could use another wide receiver depending on what happens with Juwan Jennings, and they have up until Wednesday to work with him on a contract extension because he's a restricted free agent. So that's all to say that I think San Francisco is going to be aggressive once again. They understand that with Brock Purdy on his rookie contract, they have to be aggressive and they have to do everything that they can to try to win a Super Bowl in New Orleans next February, because once they give Brock Purdy that contract extension, which will come into play down the road, once they give Brandon Ayuk that contract extension, which they can backload as well, things financially, even though the NFL salary cap is going to continue to increase, are going to become a little bit more problematic, and they're going to be faced with some of these difficult decisions. Now, you're going to have contracts coming off the books to free up dollars, but look out for the Niners to make a splash move. Now, when you talk about free agent targets specifically, I think Bobby Wagner makes a lot of sense as an affordable linebacker.
Wow. That's
I think Nick Sorensen already hired KJ Wright. He knows Bobby Wagner from his Seattle days. Bobby Wagner is still a tackling machine every year. And because he's a little bit older, he's not going to break the bank. I don't think that you can just count on Dre Greenlaw to be back for week one. I know Dr. Kenneth Jong said he can come back by week one. He's coming off an Achilles tear that he suffered in February. It's a really serious injury, one. And then number two, is he going to be the same guy who relies on speed and physicality? So Bobby Wagner, I think, would be awesome. I think he's more realistic than an Azeez Al-Shire. But Azeez Al-Shire in his first full year as a starter with Tennessee was 5th in tackles, 5th in TFLs. I think he's an option. At corner, I like a player, and I know you like him too, Kenny Moore, who can set the edge, make plays against the run. He's not going to break the bank. And then offensively, Josina Anderson throwing out Odell Beckham Jr. I know he was on the thumbnail for this. Like, I wouldn't necessarily go that route, but Darnell Mooney, vertical threat. Last 2 years, the production hasn't been good. But in his first 2 years, he was a really solid player, a great compliment if they lose Juwan Jennings. Calvin Ridley is another guy who can take the top off of the defense, who, if you lose Juwan Jennings, that could be another option. There's a lot of really good safeties, but I do like the safety tandem and pairing of Jair Brown and Talanoa Hufanga, but Hufanga's coming off that torn ACL, and that at offensive line, I think they might be out on Mike Onwenu. They might be out on Robert Hunt just because the price tag for Kevin Dotson, $16 million, may have reset the market a little bit. But those are some free agents that I'm kind of keeping an eye on here as things are going to heat up on Monday.
All right, I'm going to give you a list of guys that I like. I love Brian Burns. He's already been tagged, right? So they'd have to trade with Carolina. Isn't that the way that goes?
Yeah. So that'd have to be a trade for Brian Burns and then a contract extension on top of that pretty much. But like Josina Anderson reported, could be a 3rd round pick for Brian Burns. If that's the case, I'm all in and I'm giving him a bag. And then you use that money that you would have allocated maybe to a Chase Young and you just give it to Burns long term.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, Burns makes a lot of sense. I mean, Chris Jones, is he going back to Kansas City? If he is, so be it. But if he's not, I'd blow up my entire defensive front. I'd move on from Armstead and commit to Chris Jones. I mean, to me, Chris Jones is exactly the kind of player and person the Niners need up front. If you can't get Chris Jones, what about Christian Wilkins? I mean, he's scheme versatile. He can play in 3-4, 4-3. He can play end. He can play tackle. Greg Papa threw out Danielle Hunter as maybe a guy that he could see the 49ers going after. If I was saying more realistic names, Darius Williams, who's coming off a real good year as a corner, who's played for Staley before with the Rams. I think Williams might be a nice corner fit for them. A guy that I know a lot of people are going to say no right out of the chute because he's beefing with Debo, but we don't even know if Debo is going to be on this team. And that's C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was awesome in Philly. He was awesome at Florida. Then he was awesome with the Saints. Then he was awesome with the Eagles. Then he went to the Lions. He played pretty damn good against everybody there. Now the Eagles want him back. That right there should tell you all you need to know about how they view C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I don't see a good reason to say no to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. This guy can play corner. He can play safety. He can play free. He can play strong. He can play in the slot. I mean, that guy can man every spot in your secondary, and he is a difference maker. Azeez Al-Shaair, I think, makes a lot of sense. The Niners have shown a propensity to want to go and try to take players away from the teams they view as better than them. Last year, 2 years ago, it was Mooney. Before that, it was D. Ford. Last year, it was Hargrave. How about Nick Allegretti and Willie Gay from the Chiefs? Willie Gay is just an unbelievable speedster on that second level. Bryce Huff and Jonathan Greenard, to me, make a lot of sense as edge rushers. If you're not shopping in the Brian Burns, Danielle Hunter category, I've always been a Leonard Floyd fan. It seems like every time I watch him, he's burning off the edge in a number of different schemes. So those are the guys that stand out to me. If I had to bet money on it, I would bet probably Azeez, Allegretti, and Darius Williams. But none of those guys are real stars, and the Niners like to make a real impact with a singular star. And Kenny Moore, I think, is that kind of a star player. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. And obviously, any of those edge pieces, Greenard, Huff, Hunter, Burns, any of those guys would be considered edge, outstanding star type players. I don't know that I see the incredible edge players staring them in the face in the draft. That's a little bit, there's some guys who are way in the 230, 240 range who can rush the passer, but they typically want somebody in the 270 range. I don't know if I see a lot of those guys in this upcoming draft. So maybe the edge rush piece takes precedent. What do you think of the names I threw out there? Where do you think C.J. Gardner-Johnson winds up?
Man, I've talked about all those players here on my show, and you kind of have to break it down in tiers, as we kind of just did. Like, Brian Burns is going all in. That's a dream target for me. He's been one of the best edge rushers, and a lot of people don't realize how good he is. But consistent production since coming out of Florida State, people don't recognize his game because he's been playing for an awful organization, maybe the most poorly run organization in the sport with the Carolina Panthers. That'd be awesome. Greenard is a player that really fits the Niners mold of a player who just had a breakout season and is an analytical darling and is starting to round into his form as a late bloomer who you might be able to get not quite at the price tag on an extension of Brian Burns, but a player who could give you similar production. The same can be said for Bryce Huff. I love his story. UDFA out of Memphis, scheme familiarity with Robert Saleh. And this past year, he just had double-digit sacks for the first time in his career. He's not great against the run. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I think, is an excellent player. And what he gives you, which I think is very underrated, which is what Fred Warner gives this defense, swagger and confidence, has absolutely no fear. And like you said, he can play free. He can play strong. He has great instincts. And I thought what was really impressive is that when Philadelphia traded for him prior to 2022, in his career, he had 1,100 plus snaps at slot nickel and just over 80 snaps at safety. He plays safety. They use him as a versatile chess piece, and he missed a lot of time because of a lacerated kidney. He's still tied Justin Simmons for the most interceptions in the NFL. Good ball instincts and good ball hawking skills, and a player who can play slot, nickel, both safety spots, and you can just kind of use him as a versatile chess piece. So that's a player who, look, people are like, how can you bring him into the locker room? He has that beef with Deebo Samuel. One, again, don't know how long Deebo's going to be with this team. Hopefully he can be with this team for a couple of years because he's one of one, incredibly unique. You know what I want, though? I want good football players. And that's really all I care about. And then you worry about the rest a little bit later. And when you have players who can be versatile and fulfill multiple different roles, that's what I want. That's what the Niners really like. So again, I think you could look for the Niners to make a big splash, but look at some of those players on like that 1B tier, that second tier, who are starting to trend in that direction where, just like Charvarius Ward, he wasn't looked at as a number one corner. Niners paid him $14 million per, not quite number one corner money, but like 1B corner money. What has he developed into? Second team All-Pro. And then they get a really good player on an awesome contract that's really team friendly, and they get him at a high level player rate. And that's what I think San Francisco could be combing through right now, those types of options who aren't necessarily the star, but right below that, who then end up really being impactful players at a really good financial figure.
You know, there's people in the chat going, Krug, come on, stop it with Chris Jones. Stop it with Brian Burns. And I would say back to you, you stop it. Last year, all I heard going into free agency, the Niners don't have any money. The Niners can't do anything. They won't be able to make any moves. They're going to have to cut everybody. They won't be able to. Then they went out and signed like the biggest free agent in the market to a deal where $80 million. They gave him $40 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'm looking at the Niners right now, and they are bottom of the tier. They're over the cap by about $285,000, but they have the ability to move money around like everybody else. And I'm reading Dave Lombardi's breakdowns. He says that they could create $100 million in cap room and literally have the most cap available of any team in pro football if they wanted to do it. So, I mean, the Niners have $296.6 million in adjusted salary cap, most in the NFL. The NFL cap's 255.4. They carried over $36 million from last year. That's not been adjusted yet to the numbers I just read you. They got money back as a credit. You know, the cap went up $31 million. Purdy's not slated to get his big payday until 2025. Monday at 9 a.m. is the league tampering period begins officially. Wednesday, the new NFL year begins officially. And I know Chris Jones sounds like a pipe dream, but you never know. You never know. And you never know if Kansas City's got a point. I mean, the fact that Kansas City franchise Snead tells me that they feel like Jones is a done deal. But I wouldn't be shocked if Christian Wilkins was a 49er. I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm going to call Chase. We're going to do a stream, and I'm going to pretend like there's nobody could see this coming. I could see this coming. Absolutely. They can do kind of what they want to do here. They got a lot of flexibility. They got a lot of carryover. They're inside their Super Bowl window. There's some urgency there to get it done this year before Purdy's a $25 million player. So I don't think it's, I mean, I understand all of you guys for banging on me going, Krug, stop smoking the drapes over there with your Chris Jones. But you know what? Last year at this point, if we'd been talking Hargrave, you would have had the exact same comment in the chat. Oh, that's totally unrealistic. So let's just see how this shakes out. Two guys I got to ask you about. Daniel Popper of The Athletic, who's a good guy who covers the Chargers, was on 95.7 The Game, and they discussed Joey Bosa. And he said, you know, what do you think of Joey Bosa, you know, reuniting with Nick on the Niners? Popper said on the radio, I wouldn't rule it out. At the end of the day, Joey Bosa, he's been pretty public about the fact that he always wanted to play with his brother. He's got a base salary of 15 this year, 17 next year. I'm not super fluent in Niner cap, but that's what you would be taking on for, you know, 2024 and 2025. So we'll see. What do you think of the idea? I mean, obviously, you know, Popper goes on to say, I think the Chargers should at least listen. If they're listening, then I think there's a number of places that make sense for Joey Bosa. He spent his entire career with the Chargers, number 3 pick overall in 2016. 4-time Pro Bowler. He's had injuries the last 2 years, only 9 sacks in the last 2 years combined, only 14 games in the last 2 years combined. What do you think of Bosa? What do you think of Joey coming over? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it fit? Does it not fit?
Certainly a fascinating conversation, and I think it comes down to how much he's going to demand if the Chargers let him go. And from the Chargers standpoint, I think it's a $14 million cap savings if they cut him pre-June 1, which for them makes a lot of sense with the new head coach, a new general manager, as they try to tinker with that roster. They have their quarterback. They have some other really good pieces, and Joey Bosa has barely been able to play. How much does he want? And going back to the Chris Jones conversation too, who do you let go of on that defensive line in order to make this happen? Because the candidate that a lot of people bring up is Eric Armstead, but pre-June 1, dead money is $25.8 million, and the cap savings is 2.49. So that doesn't make sense at all. And then post-June 1, dead money is $10.3 million, but the cap savings is $18 million. So pretty much $8 million there. With Joey Bosa, you think about what him and his brother could be if Joey can stay healthy. They're two great edge rushers who love ball, love getting in the lab, iron sharpens iron, love perfecting their game. But I'd be scared shitless of Joey Bosa coming to the Niners just because of the injury history here. And you look at his career, rookie year, plays 12 games, year 2, 16, year 3, 7, year 4, 16, year 5, 12, year 6, 16. Last 2 years, though, respectively, in 2022, 5 games played and 9 games played. Now, when he's been healthy, the sack production has been great year by year, 10.5, 12.5, 5.5, 11.5, 7.5, 10.5, 2.5, 6.5. So even though he's missed time, even when he's missed time, the sack production in those games is really good. Now, if Joey Bosa is like, hey, I made enough money. It's been my dream to play with Nick on the other side. Let's sign a 1-year deal. Let's cause some havoc. Let me up my value a little bit. Let's chase the Super Bowl. I'll take $3 to $5 million. Then I'm all in, because then the financial risk isn't really all there. But if the Chargers let him go, he wants a multi-year deal. And even if it's $15 million, I'd honestly maybe rather have Chase Young, who's 24, whose physical presence is really impressive. Can you get him to buy in with the effort issues and him actually giving a shit? And he's younger, less injury issues. I'd rather just have a player like that back. But if Joey Bosa wants to come at a highly discounted rate, and then that allows you to also bring back a Cleveland Ferrell and a Randy Gregory, and you have Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Cleveland Ferrell, Randy Gregory, I'm down with that defensive line rotation at the edge spots, and I'd at least entertain it.
What do you think of the Wilkins fit? Because I'm intrigued by Christian Wilkins, man. I know he's kind of a weird guy. He's grabbed guys' nuts and stuff, and he's done some weird stuff. Let's be honest. But the guy is scheme versatile. He's a good high character guy outside of grabbing guys' balls and that kind of thing. But I mean, I like Christian Wilkins as a player. I like him as a rusher. I like him against the run. I like him in that 34, but I like him in a 4-3 at tackle. I like him in the 4-3 at end if you want to go kind of a bigger look. Do you think what's going to happen with Wilkins? I mean, I was shocked that he wasn't franchised by Miami.
I was surprised too, because Miami is an interesting team that has invested heavily in some players, haven't invested heavily in other players. This is a homegrown player who you took with the 13th overall pick in the 2019 draft, and now you're not going to pay him when you've paid other players. And I think with Christian Wilkins, he's a unique build because he's not a traditional 330-pound defensive tackle. He's 6'4", 310. And I like him against the run. And the Niners need a better run-stuffing defensive tackle. He can also get after the quarterback. He's got a really quick first step, and he's really powerful. He can pack a punch where little swim move, little power rush, he can get by you. He had 9 sacks this past year. He's never really been a massive sack artist. 2 sacks, 1.5, 4.5, 3.5, and 9 in his first 5 years in the NFL. But in Vic Fangio's system, he kind of broke out where he had those 9 sacks this past year. What's the price tag for him? I think it's going to be steep. I think it's $25 million for a player who came into the league at 24. So he's a little bit older at the end of that 5-year rookie contract. So he's going to be 29 years old this year. Again, though, what do you do at defensive tackle? You can't move on from Hargrave. We talked about the big cap hit with Eric Armstead if you want to move on. Is this a player, the splash player, where you're like, well, it helps us with sack production. It helps us against the run as well. We're willing to make an investment in that player. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I do like the player, though, a lot.
How many years have you covered the Niners?
This
what was your
will be
first year covering?
2021. So this will be my 4th season, 2024, covering the team.
Okay, so you didn't necessarily cover them when they had DJ Jones, but there was some
I
talk
did last year.
Oh, okay,
2021 was his last year, and
okay,
he was awesome.
He
was really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy. First of all, he's a great guy. I
Yes.
mean, besides that, I mean, you know, that's all secondary, really. But it always helps, and he is a great guy. But this guy is just, I think, absolutely one of the great run defenders in the A gap in the league. You know, you're talking about a guy, 10.5-inch hands, 6'1", 320. But you know what I love about him? He plays the game on his feet. He's a force against the run. He's a freaky combination of strength and quickness. Benjamin Albright, I bring him up because according to Benjamin Albright, he says a number of Broncos, and he names DJ Jones, likely gone because of their cap situation. The Niners drafted him in 2017 in the 6th round. Broncos signed him away to a 3-year, $30 million deal. There wasn't a single person in the room that begrudged DJ for leaving, but he has been sorely missed. He's got short area quickness. He's got enormous weight room strength. In a lot of ways, I think he would solve their inside run issues and make them better against the tush push with Philly, make them better on the goal line, better in short yardage. The Niners have been a joke as far as short yardage D, and I don't even care what the numbers say. They give up any yard that another team wants to have. They didn't do that under DJ. What do you think? Could Denver pay some of that money? Niners give a day 3 pick and bring a guy like Jones back in the fold? To me, that's the ideal addition to their defensive front. Because as you said, Hargrave ain't going anywhere, and he's a pass rusher. So the guy complimenting him inside's got to be a fire hydrant, you run defender of the highest order, and that's what DJ is.
Yeah, he's literally the perfect fit for what the Niners need. And if you address edge rusher with some of the players that we've been talking about, and then you have Kalia Davis and DJ Jones as your backup defensive tackles, and maybe you draft another one behind Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave, I love the makeup of that defensive front. And DJ Jones, the Niners have really missed him. In 2021, he really came into his own and was awesome. I think he had 10 tackles for loss as a rotational player, made some big plays in some critical moments, especially in the playoffs. There was not any chance in hell the Niners were going to pay him a 3-year, $30 million contract. In fact, the Broncos probably regret that because he's not worth $10 million per year. But is he worth being a backup defensive tackle who solves your issues against the run, and you've been gashed when teams run right up the gut against you, and has pass rushing ability? I think that he's a perfect fit for those reasons. And this is all part of the Russell Wilson fallout, which goes down as one of the worst trades of all time and one of the worst contract extensions all time. He was so bad and unbearable that the Broncos were eating all of this money, and Sean Payton hated him so much, he said, we'll eat that money, just get out of my face and get out of the building, that now you have to let go of Justin Simmons, you have to bring back Tim Patrick on a rework deal, and now you either have to trade DJ Jones. I think he could be cut because of this reason. He's got a cap charge and a cap hit of $12.9 million for 2024 for Denver, but the dead cap hit is only $2.9 million. So it's not that much. So if they let go of him, they eat 2.9, and then they don't have to pay him that huge cap number of nearly $13 million. Trading for him, I think, could be an option if the Broncos want to eat some of that money too. Late round pick swaps, sure. And I'll pay some of that money too if it's like $4 or $5 million, because I understand his importance to what the Niners need. how he understands the system, how he's complemented some of the players on this defensive line and Armstead and Bosa before, I think he'd be a really, really good player. His PFF numbers last year weren't great. Overall grade of 56, 14 hurries, 18 pressures, though. And you'll take that from a backup defensive tackle. That's one of the players who I talked about on, Thursday show on the Niners Report, who I'm like, man, if this is a possibility, I'm all in if the money makes sense, because I think the scheme fit makes a lot of sense, and I like the player a lot.
Couple more minutes with Chase Sr. Always enjoy Fridays with Chase here on the Krueger Show. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. I'll get this. Well, let me just get this one out of the way. Josina Anderson listed the Niners as a possible spot for OBJ. We've been talking about OBJ and the Niners for so long. I just don't think that OBJ, at this point, you want a receiving core that complements one another. So what piece do the Niners need to complement what they have? They need like Tyler Harrell from Louisville or Miami. They need Danny Gray. They need that guy who's going to take the top off the defense. That's the complementary piece they need. They don't need another slowish guy who's going to, take up red zone targets. They need to be throwing the ball to Debo, and if not Debo, JJ, and if not JJ, Ayuk. You know what I mean? I don't see. Josina was looking at that solely from OBJ's perspective. Like, I bet she has a relationship with OBJ, got on the horn and said, OBJ, where would you like to play? And he listed those places, and she wrote it down and put it into a report. I don't think OBJ is a fit from the Niners' perspective. I think it's a fit from her perspective and his perspective. What did you think when you saw OBJ to the Niners?
It's so funny when name value players like this who are really popular become available, and people are like, Odell Beckham Jr., can you imagine him on this Niners offense?
Right.
He hasn't had a quality year or more than 1,000 yards receiving since 2019. And it doesn't sound like that was that long ago. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here in 2024. And he's had injury issues. And while the injuries have gone up, the production has gone down. He's lost a step. I did think that he was really solid for the Rams in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl before he tore that ACL. This year, 565 yards. But is the drama and are the antics worth it when the player isn't the same caliber player that he once was? I don't think so. And let's be real. The injuries have been occurring for a really long time. They started in 2017, and they've been reoccurring since then. So him out of the slot, I actually think it could work because he's shifty, going up against some nickel slot corners or some linebackers. I think he can beat those types of players. And in that offense for Baltimore, almost 600 yards isn't terrible. But in a deep wide receiver class, why wouldn't you just draft and develop a young stud wide receiver who's a better player, who might even be cheaper? And this is where the pick and missing on Danny Gray, because I think we can chalk it up as a miss, really hurts them, because a vertical burner with Ayuk, Debo, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, it would be awesome for this team. But he's done zilch since getting drafted in the third round. Another third round miss for this front office, by the way, out of SMU. He was a 4.3 40-yard dash guy. He was a combine darling, but hasn't gotten the trust of Kyle Shanahan. And that miss has hurt San Francisco. But I'm willing to go back to the well and draft a wide receiver in the first, second, or third round. And maybe you draft them and they have a secondary role for this team this year. And then if you need to make that difficult decision of moving on from a Debo, if you can't bring back a Jawan Jennings because another team gives him a DJ Jones level contract as far as overpaying a player that other organization really likes, I'm down to draft and develop a wide receiver in hopes that they can become maybe a Brandon Ayuk down the road, maybe a Debo Samuel type of player like an Xavier Leggett, who, by the way, is 6 foot, 220 pounds, and was a sub 4.5 40-yard dash guy.
He's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Leggett is really, really good. AG asked this one. He says, I really feel like Luke McCaffrey fits the mold as a wide receiver on this team. Fast, strong, good middle of the field.
I agree.
And blocks and high character. You were in Indy, and you had a chance to face up. I'm jealous, by the way.
It was awesome.
You were in Indy, and you were in Mobile too?
I was not in Mobile, no.
Oh,
that was a little bit too close to the Niners Super Bowl run, and I knew I was going to Vegas.
Okay. But you were in Indy, and you had a chance to talk to Niner people. You also had a chance to talk to prospects. What do you think? Do you think the Niners would be more likely to go after a Brendan Rice or a Luke McCaffrey? I know this. Christian loves the idea of playing with Luke. I mean, really, really badly wants it. It will be pushing for it. He will have the conversation with John Lynch. Hey, John, don't forget my guy. The Niners do have 2/3 and 2/4, and this is where this kid's going to go. They could easily wind up with Luke McCaffrey. What did you think of McCaffrey versus Rice? If you could have one of those guys, who would you rather have?
Yeah, they're different players, and Luke actually ran faster than Christian at the combine. And he started his college career as a quarterback. He made the switch to wide receiver. He went to Rice, and he put up really, really good numbers his last 2 years as a full-time wide receiver. It's so funny, too. He sounds identical to Christian and looks just like a young Ed, who, by the way, in his day was an all-pro. So really good genes. And then their mom was a soccer stud at Stanford. Their other brother was really good. He started his college career as a quarterback at Michigan. So Luke
was all conference this year at Rice in year one.
Yeah,
playing wide receiver.
Yeah,
and that's pretty impressive.
It's really impressive to make that positional switch and then to be that good out of the slot. A shifty, quality footwork, reliable hands, fast guy out of the slot, who, by the way, is 6'2", 200 pounds. So he's taller than Christian. I think would be an awesome addition. And yeah, his last 2 years, he had 723 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns in 2022, and then 992 and 13 touchdowns this past year. So he can play. He's legit. He's fast. He's shifty. He could be a mismatch nightmare out of the slot. It's a fit. And then Brendan Rice is like a 4.5 40-yard dash guy. He's a little bit bigger and bulkier than his dad, Jerry. But his production with Caleb Williams throwing him the rock was really good too. But I think he's more of a slower perimeter wide receiver. So I think the player that makes more sense for what the Niners need is actually Luke coming out of the slot. And Christian said in the lead up to the Super Bowl on opening media night, I would love the opportunity to play with Luke. And look, I don't think you can rule this out. Luke has met with the Niners multiple times since the Senior Bowl. Brendan had a formal meeting with San Francisco and Indianapolis. Frank Gore Jr. has met informally with the Niners. I think one of those three is a Niner via the draft. Frank Gore, maybe late rounds or a UDFA, and we have a little bit of a family business, family reunion type of deal to talk about.
Yeah, no, and it's not like I'm about this because I'm that guy that needs, the sons of Niners to play. I like these guys. I like all three of those players. I saw the Shrine game and I saw Gore's kid get loose. All right, last question for you. We got two supers. Mike Nolan says, any chance 49ers draft Michael James out of Oregon? Yeah, thank you. Let's hope not. My prediction is if they do, he'll fumble in the Super Bowl. Boxing fan times 4 says Odell is Von Miller 2.0, just looking for an easy ring. Ain't nothing wrong with that. All right, here we go. Last question. If we had a sponsor, a major sponsor, let's just say our channels were like, the Niner channel version of like the Beast, Mr. Beast. And we had somebody saying, we're going to put $100,000 on the table for Chase and for Larry if they can correctly predict the one free agent and the one draft eligible player that you would say here on March the 8th will be a 49er come camp, who with big money on the table is Chase Sr. going with. And if you want to go Luke McCaffrey, you can, because that's a solid one too.
Yeah.
I may go Luke McCaffrey, and I'll go first, or you can go first, whatever way you want to do it.
I'm ready to go. I think in the draft, I'll give you two. Graham Barton falls. He's going to the Niners.
Okay.
Xavier Worthy at 31, I think, is in play. I really do think he's in play. He even said playing alongside Debo and Ayuk would be awesome. Kyle Shanahan's at the Texas building all the time because he's tight with Sarkisian. I love that offense. So those are two draftees. To free agency, I think Grenard or Bryce Huff fits, again, like that Mooney Ward type of player. Late bloomer, starting to round into form. They're not going to get top of the market money, but right below that.
I'm going to go in the draft. I'm going to go with Braden Fisk from Florida State. I just think that, I could see incredible things from Braden Fisk in this defense. And in free agency, I'm going to go with Azeez Al-Shaair on the comeback.
Okay. I like that.
I think Azeez Al-Shaair on the comeback and Braden Fisk. I could have gone with McCaffrey's brother because that, I think, is very likely too. I'm rooting hard for Rook Orororo, but something tells me Braden Fisk, that workout in Indy combined with the way he looked in the one-on-ones, combined with the way he looked at, isn't he a Western Michigan transfer, right, who went to Florida State?
Yep.
I just think that he checks a lot of their boxes. He's going to be, I love the motor. I love the interior rush, especially if the Niners play games. Braden Fisk, Azeez Al-Shaair, and you're going once again with who?
I cheated a little bit, but Graham Barton, Xavier Worthy at 31. The thing with Worthy too, returnability, in addition to him being a burner. And then in free agency, Grenard or Bryce Huff.
Yeah, Huff would be very easy. Very easy. Okay, so I will go with Azeez, Al-Shaair, and Fisk with a side dish of McCaffrey.
I like optionality in life. That's why I gave you multiple options.
There you go. CMC. All right, man. Hey, what do you got cooking on you guys have been blowing up, dude. I love some of the shorts that you guys are doing. Kev's a big fan. You guys are really doing a great job covering the Niners. What do you got cooking the rest of the day?
Just continuing to set the table for free agency. I went nuts about this McKivitz signing a little bit earlier. I just had a meltdown on the show. So if you want to watch that video, you can. Top free agent targets to come. We'll get some clips from this show to put up on the Niners Report too, because I love coming on here every Friday. It's been an absolute blast. And we'll continue to set the stage for free agency, which is going to be, I think, pretty wild for San Francisco.
Oh, no doubt. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun to watch. Everybody go check out Chase Senior and Chat Sports. They do an amazing job. What am I promoting them for? They've got 100,000 subs. I'm just over here with 40,000 going, hey,
dude,
you know
you're
what?
Crushing.
I'm doing a little bit of work over here.
I've talked with a lot of people. I love studying other YouTube channels and other content creators and other people like in the business just in general, whether it be radio, television, digital. I've worked in all of those fields, and early in my career, obviously I'm younger, but people are like, dude, Krug's crushing. I'm like, fuck yeah, he's crushing. He's doing 5 streams a day, working almost 7 days a week. And that's what happens when you work hard, when you're dedicated, when you're passionate, but then the audience responds to that. That's why you have 41,000 subscribers. And it's not even like you've been doing this incredibly long, right? So you're doing awesome stuff.
I've got a lot of content. I've got 40,000 subs and just a loose passing relationship with my wife and children. So, there's a payoff to everything, but you got to do what you got to do. Yeah. All right, man. Hey, have a great Friday. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks to everybody. Pig in a pickle. Peace. We're out.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get